I'm in a holy place, in a beautiful part of the world. And John is in his 80s, doesn't look it, clearly. And he is a YouTube sensation. He teaches us about spirituality, meditation, really connecting with the self in ways that I found so inspiring that I decided it was worth to take the trip all the way to come and meet him, where he teaches, where he tells us what I believe is the truth. So we are in Bakewell, somewhere near Manchester. Don't quote me on my geography. I have no idea where that is. I met John a while back. We tried to film this on the hill, and then due to our luck, it was windy. And so we ended up in this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful house of God. And John comes here twice a day to meditate and teach meditation. And I think that will be probably one of my very, very important investigations today, to try and understand meditation in a church. Seems to be an interesting meeting of, if you want, East and West in our world today. But I want to start by saying thank you so much for giving me the time. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you share with the world. It's been quite shocking, really, how much of our world is moving in a direction where they need more and more of what you teach us, John. But I want to start from here. Can you tell me a little bit about this beautiful place?
Well, I can, Mo, but may I first of all correct a little bit of your introduction?
Absolutely.
First of all, I do not consider myself a teacher.
Most teachers don't.
And I'd rather that word was avoided. I'm an old man and I've had a lot of experience which I'm willing to share, but I make no presumption to be a teacher. Neither do I consider myself to be wise.
Most wise people don't, John.
Well, then I join their company, because it really is. It's the most misleading thing. In fact, it's anyone who thinks they know or is entitled to teach others is on the slippery slope. So I'm careful to avoid it. I have no wish to be considered in that way. Now, this church that I come to, well, like most English churches, it goes back a long time. When did men? It's on a natural promontory of rock overlooking a valley. And no doubt prehistoric men stood here and thought about life. And probably before them the dinosaurs lay here and looked over the valley and similarly considered whatever they did. So when the first building was put up, God knows. But stones go on from one building to the next, don't they? They fall down, they're used for the next building, fall down, and they're used again and again. So these stones are surrounding us.
They've lived.
They've lived. The earliest bits of this church remaining go back to, well, not quite Roman times, but very early on. And then bits have been added on and off ever since. So some bits are medieval, some bits are Victorian. But I like to come here to meditate and feel I'm in 1,000 years of prayer have taken place in this place. And although I've explored far and wide in the world of religion, I don't really consider myself a religious person. I'm glad that I feel grateful to use this traditional English place of prayer. And especially I love this. There's a lovely spire above us reaching up to the sky. And here in this space of the church, I like to think of all the different people and all the different teachings and thoughts and contentions and agreements that have taken place here. And yet, above this space, the building tapers up in the spire, lovely, gracious spire, reaching up and dissolving into the infinite sky, which is an exact symbol of meditation. Exactly how it is, that here is the world, a conglomeration of confusion very often, and yet when we meditate, we just let go and rise and dissolve into the infinite, as is demonstrated by every church spire in the country, and indeed the perpendicular arm of the cross.
But meditation has not been central, I believe, to some of the Abrahamic religions. So, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, we have prayer. We don't have meditation.
Well, words. What do words mean? Who knows what meditation is? I hardly know myself. What is meditation? What is the spire doing? I told you, dissolving into the infinite. Now, doesn't any person, didn't those dinosaurs, prehistoric men who sat on this rock, looked out over the space of the valley? Aren't they taken into the greater space? Long before anybody used a word like meditation. It's the most natural thing in the world. Look, any man that looks up at the sky, looks up at the stars, or stands on a hill and gets a broader point of view. That's natural meditation, isn't it? What do you want an artificial system for? Meditation is just as normal as breathing. Everybody does it naturally.
That's very interesting.
But this day and age we make everything so complicated. Everything's got to be processed through the mind of man and come up with some clever word like meditation, which we spend half our lives trying to figure out what it means. It's as simple as that. Bakewell is a beautiful spot. People come here for just to sit by the river and feed the ducks. We sit on a bench there, have their fish and chips, feed the ducks, have a lovely day. What's that if not meditation? Natural meditation. They go home feeling better.
And that's definitely what we've been missing in the fast-paced, running kind of modern world, because, in a way, we don't even have the time to feed the ducks anymore.
Well, to our loss. Most people find something that anyone who keeps a dog, strokes a dog, that's a natural meditation, isn't it? I know there are not many things. My mother, for example, used to knit. She spent her evenings knitting. What better meditation was there than sitting by the fire knitting? Dad was an artist. There's no better meditation than drawing the pencil, careful drawing the outline of a tree. That's natural meditation. Anybody that does anything carefully, if you just cut up vegetables carefully, attentively, that's meditation, isn't it? It's bringing the attention to a point, and then you find the mind is naturally quiet. Because if you're attending to something, you've no time to be thinking, have you? It's ever so simple. If you just clean your teeth attentively, you'll find you're not thinking in those few moments when you clean your teeth. That's what meditation is. Meditation is just a way of, as it were, bypassing the agitated mind.
But then you still come here twice a day, as you told me.
Yes, well,
for the practice.
This can be taken further and further and further. But I do wish to emphasize how natural it is and how in little ways we can have rather you can say sort of childish meditations,
Beginner's guide.
beginners meditation, but not to disparage it, because then one may develop it further, yes, further and further and further. Indeed, I've been practicing for 60 years and had a lot of experience. Yes, where does it end? Because where does the church spire end? Where does the infinite end? And it may, yes, indeed, it may deepen and deepen and end up becoming the great adventure without end as life itself dies out, and one may grow out of this life into the infinite.
There are some spiritual teachings that tell us that the way you live here is the way you are in the infinite.
The way you are in the infinite.
Yeah, so it's basically if you live a life that is a life of compassion, as you leave this physical world, you live a life of compassion. If you live a life of reflection and contemplation, of calm, while if you live a life of anger or aggravation or grabbing, that becomes your unsettled state in a next life, if you want. So maybe we should talk about life first. What is life?
This life. Well, the one thing I know about meditation is that you can't describe it. Look, how can you, if you think of the church spire again, I talk of it dissolving, but how can you describe it? Dissolves into what? Who knows? Who can describe God? Who can describe the infinite? Description belongs to this lower world, this world of separation. To describe something is putting it into a little box. This is the world of duality. The real world is beyond description.
That's confusing. I understand that, but that's for a humanity that has become so obsessed with knowledge, so obsessed with everything has to fit in a box. That's a very difficult place to be for someone to tell them there is something beyond this, but it's not describable.
Look, my dear, it's as simple as pie. Look, here am I, you and I, just sitting here. Look, let's just stop talking for a minute and be quiet. It's silent, isn't it? We're sitting in silence, aren't we? Our eyes are blinking in stillness. We're breathing in silence, perfect silence. The wind is buffeting the church in silence. Simple, isn't it? In utter simplicity. You can't describe it. You can describe silence. Nobody knows what it is. Couldn't be simpler.
It's everywhere, but it's intangible.
Intangible, it's intangible and it's indescribable. But the very first step in this work is just to stop talking.
Stop talking and stop thinking.
Well, thinking is more difficult. You can't really stop thinking, but you don't have to. There's no reason to stop thinking. What for? Thinking isn't a problem if you know how to deal with it. Thinking is a problem if you think it's a problem.
No, tell me more. What does that
Shall I tell you how to deal with thoughts? Well, think of on a day like this, it's the sky's half cloudy and half clear, isn't it? When a cloud comes over the sun, cloud takes over, doesn't it? Well, think of the thoughts like clouds, and then what happens when you get in an aeroplane?
Get above them.
You go up above the clouds. What's above the clouds? Space. And you can't describe space, can you? Who can describe the space? You can describe clouds, but clouds are just clouds. Like the mind. The mind's just a layer of clouds.
They cover our light. They cover.
On cloudy days, they do, yes. And then, but you see, if we have moments of attention, when we actually peel an apple, for example, with attention, then you see that attention is akin to an aeroplane. And it just takes you through the clouds. You just forget about the clouds then, don't you? Mm. And just as you forget about them, what happens? They just disappear. And then when you start giving them attention again, they come back.
Why then have we glorified thinking so much? Why do we live in a world where everything's about thinking?
Two things in this world have no limit: the foolishness of man and the mercy of God. Because we don't know any better.
I mean, some people will say, but this civilization we've built, the bricks laid one on top of the other to form this church is some kind of a cleverness of man.
Yes, indeed. Well, if that's your aim in life, to be clever and build clever buildings, well, God bless you. If that's what you want. But you may want something else. You may want the infinite.
Oh, no. Don't tell us this and stop here. What does that mean? I want the infinite.
You want the infinite.
So how do we get to the infinite?
Well, pay attention to it. Go in that direction. Seek it. And where is it? I've just told you. It's here, isn't it? This, first of all, start with the silence. Where does silence end? It has no end. We first experience it here, fills the valley, goes out beyond the valley, all the way to our homes. The silence is infinite. And isn't it the same as space? And isn't it also still and unchanging and undivided? What? What? Universal? If you like, silence, stillness. And what is spirit? What is peace? Isn't it peace? Isn't it freedom? Isn't it? It is, isn't it? Spirit. And it's here. Isn't it interesting? But the little bit of elastic you see in our habits, but you see, because of course we're accustomed to not be silent. We're accustomed not to be at peace. We're programmed to be restless. Although instinctively we yearn for rest. And all we've got to do is just be present, be here now, and recognize that it is present. The Lord is with us. God is present. As Jesus says, I am with you always. We are absent. This is the human. We are absent from the presence of God. Why? Why did Adam fall from paradise? We're tempted. And we're foolish. Like a puppy on a lead, always wanting to go off somewhere. You watch the little ducks on the river. Oh, they're always wanting to go off, and the mother there just sort of patiently calls them back again.
So, by the way, I want to ask a few more questions about this. I'll come back to them because I don't know if everyone can grasp what we just said.
No, you can't grasp it with the intellect. Of course you can't. It's more than that. And see, what motivates us? Well, you see, very often, so we swan along, going our own way in this life, and then what happens? Well, very often someone dies, or there's some tragedy, something brings us up short. Something breaks the complacency of our lives, and we begin to think a little bit more deeply what it's all about. This is how it often starts. Yes, indeed. When I learned to meditate, I was 26. I'd gone out to South America. I'd also been in business. I'd done quite a lot, really, in those first years of my life. And I went out to South America to make the world a better place. I was a young farmer. I thought I knew how to grow food to feed the hungry. And when I was out there was one particular occasion. I'd been planting trees, trying to reforest the Andes. And I was sitting on a mountain one day, and a little voice said to me, to make whole, be whole. Well, I didn't understand what it meant, of course, but been trying to understand it all my life, really. But many, many people have a motivation to try to do good, try to help others, try to make the world a better place. Young people are full of it these days, aren't they? Crusading against pollution and one thing and another. Well, that's what I was told as a young man, to make whole, be whole. And somehow I related, I'd heard of meditation. Meditation was quite new in the West at that time, really unknown. And anyway, when I came home, I looked for and I found a school of meditation. And I practiced ever since. And gradually, the meaning of those words has developed. And I've come to realize that in discovering the wholeness within myself, I thereby could reflect that into the world around me. And this gave me a huge motivation to continue with what I now call this work. Well, people come to it in different ways. And when I went to be taught to meditate in London, I was asked, what do you really, really want in life? Well, I knew what I wanted at that time. But people will give many answers. Very often it's peace, love, to love and be loved, freedom. It's usually in those sort of answers.
Happiness.
Happiness. Which are all rather intangible, aren't they? Hard to say exactly what they are. But when we begin to discover this what's beyond, you see, this material existence, this world that comes to pass, then we begin to realize that this is where all these indescribable, intangible objectives come from. They're all actually features of the one infinite reality, which is unfailing, you see, whereas this world, you go off on holiday, you have freedom, you have an adventure, climb a mountain or something, you've got to come back home again, haven't you? You fall in love, it's marvelous, and may or may not work out. Eventually one of you dies. Those things happen. This life is a temporary phenomena, and the human soul craves for permanence, for what doesn't say no, the eternal reality, the kingdom of God, eternal life.
So we go through this life and we set all of those targets and we run. And many of us never reach.
Indeed. No.
Do you believe that this is God's will for them to not reach somewhere? Or why do some of us tread that path and others not?
Yes, I spent many, many, many years trying to understand what's meant by God's will. Why, indeed, as I understand it now, everything in this world is under perfect law. I was a farmer. I've had many, many opportunities to observe the grass, the earth, the insects, to see that everything happens. Look, on a day like this, every leaf in the country is undulating, moving according to the currents of the wind, isn't it? Absolute perfection. A few leaves are being blown off the trees and are finding their way back to the earth. Even the grass is moving and bending in the wind, isn't it? And here in the church, you can hear it on the roof of the church. Look, here are the bells. Hear the echoes of the bells. Perfect sound, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Every hair of why do our hairs on our faces grow as they do? Look at our eyes perfectly operating, blinking, cleansing the eyes. Isn't every grain of dust in perfect order? Every spider in every corner? Perfection. What is not perfect? And although it's more difficult, because we can't see it, but from such examples, extended, one can realize that nothing happens without a reason. Without a reason. There's no such thing as an accident. Things happen for a reason. Now, this life is a very temporal thing, here today and gone tomorrow. Where did we come from? Where do we go? We don't know. But again, as a farmer, I'm only too well aware that what you do one year has an effect in the next. If you put manure on the land one year, it'll grow bigger crops the next year. And so it is with us. How we live is somehow transmitted. Don't ask me how, but it is, isn't it? Why are we born different? Where's the shape of our bodies? We're both of us. Look at the colour of our skin is different. Why is it? I'm a mixture of two races, half English, half Russian, and both play a part in my character. Very noticeable. So it is with all of us. So, although I can't explain, I sort of am confident that our passage through this life is ordained and it has a purpose. There's an old hymn, God is working his purpose out. As year succeeds to year. And it's very interesting to being old. I look back now on my life, and in many ways it's been a life of failure. We learn by our mistakes, so we're told. Which is, I can see how in a marvellous way it's been what I needed, and everything has been sort of conducive to a purpose.
That's so profound. You look back at your life and it's been a life of failure that leads maybe to a purpose.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely. Because, see, I come back to the fact that I'm rather inclined to quote scripture, so forgive me if I do. See, one of the great sayings of Jesus is that the kingdom of God is not of this world. You see, this world is a temporary thing, isn't it? It's here today, it's gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Only too obvious, isn't it? It's fine one day, it's wet the next. Look me, I'm soon going to die out. And yet this eternal reality, this silence which expanded, reaches, contains the stars, doesn't it? It has no end. It's infinite. What am I if not that? Am I this performance, this temporal performance for a few short years? Doesn't man's what do we mean by the soul? Nobody knows. And yet it's that part of man, that this insatiable longing for perfect love, for perfect everything, for perfection, for completion, that we just don't find in this world. For meaning, for the fullness of meaning. I assure you that I suppose this is why I've meditated for 60 years. Because little by little by little, so gradually, it has, I'm still as excited at coming to meditate as I was when I started. The adventure never ends. Little by little, it reveals ever more and more. And in contrast, in a way, this world gets smaller and smaller, smaller and more temporal.
That is again so profound. So I tend to feel as the years pass that all of this life, when you're a younger person, it seems to be so exciting and so interesting and so important. And then, you have experiences, you go through some of those things and you go like, that's it. And then you can have another experience and it just fades in its importance to you.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Indeed. And yet I'm still a child, I really am. I'm still a little boy in a grey beard because in contrast to what opens up, I'm just in preparatory school, really.
Tell us a bit about that. What does that mean? How do you play?
Well, I think this life to me now does seem a preparatory school, a sort of elementary school, first school, where we're prepared to move up into high school.
Wow. And what is the high school?
I don't know, dear. It's beyond description. If even the little bit that I do understand is beyond description, that's the reason. And there's a lovely biblical phrase, from glory to glory. That's what it is.
But why then is life complicated?
Because it's always very helpful to come back to silence. And let me just act as sort of add one of my favorite principles is feet on the ground, because if we feel feet on the ground, the ground is still, isn't it? Even if you're in a high-rise block of flats, if you put your feet on the ground, the floor is still. So if you want peace, my dears, you can never be closer to it than just feeling your feet on the ground. There you are. In the most crazy pop concert or something, you can put your feet on the ground and feel the silence of the ground. And the silence. Now, this silence is undivided, isn't it? It's just silence. There's no question there. There's no argument. It's just silence. We all know what it is. And it's absolute simplicity. Now, when we turn away from silence into the world of description and thinking, you suddenly find what's called duality, which is this or that, good and bad, alternatives. And then one thing leads to another. Now, come back to silence again. In silence, there is an awareness of silence, isn't there? Otherwise, there's a recognition of it, isn't there? And it hasn't really got a name, has it? And when you turn away from silence, John, Mo, suddenly you come into the world of two, world of difference. Now, I'm John, I'm old. I'm Mo, I'm not so old, isn't it?
No, you never know.
Not quite as old as me.
A few years younger.
Younger. And so you can, add on, I'm John, I'm this so-and-so, so-and-so. I can spend the rest of today just telling you all about my life story. And it gets more and more complicated. You get. So you see, we go first of all from one to two, and then by subdivision, division into complication. Endless variations of the theme. That is the world of duality, the world of many, the world of complication. Come back to spirit, to one, and it's singular, isn't it? Just one. One I am. One I am before I've added on, I am John, an old man of 80. It's pure I am, pure being. It's the same for me, the same for you. As Adam in the Garden of Eden was singular. One man, one original being. Before he fell into a lower state of consciousness where there were alternatives, right or wrong. And so the world has spread out. But to come back to the silence is like the threshold of a world of unity, a world of oneness. And people, of course, are trying desperately to try to find oneness in the divided world, which doesn't work very well, trying to make oneness out of the political system or make sense of it politically. Well, you're trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, aren't you? It doesn't really work. But if you come back to this true oneness, the unity of just being present into silence. And by the way, you can go on talking and yet be aware of the silence. It's like holding an invisible hand, isn't it? Holding on to this rock, this absolute reliability of the silent presence while the performance goes on. And this is where inner strength comes from. This is where peace comes from. This is where a sense of the unity of life comes from.